Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the newly rebranded Spring Institute 2019. I'd like to kick things off by inviting Professor Jack Lohman to the podium to start with our land acknowledgement and opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Leah. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to all the staff. Welcome to all our members, Commode members, friends, colleagues, but a particular warm welcome to our special guest today, who flew in last night from Kigali, Rwanda, the Director General of the National Museums of Rwanda, Alphonse Mulisa. Thank you so much for joining us. What a privilege it is to have you with us. One of the really, truly great museum people who inspire me personally, and hopefully we'll hear from you this afternoon. Well, allow me first to acknowledge the importance and the respect we have for the deep history and traditions of the Songhees in the Esquimalt people on whose land the museum was built and stands. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome you to the Royal BC Museums and Archives Spring Institute, our annual showcase of staff, partner and associate research. This year, for the first time, we're discussing, sharing and celebrating our research over 2 days rather than a single day. So I offer my deepest congratulations to everyone who's contributed to the vitality and increased output of our research programme over the last year. I'd like to begin this year's showcase of current research by talking a bit about limits and about breaking through perceived and historic limitations to provide those engaging with our research with more comprehensive and comprehensible knowledge about global issues through our local BC lens. The future of museum research, in my opinion, rests on our ability to tell larger stories to more audiences using more diverse forms of research and creative activity. At one of our board meetings recently, I was asked to explore generalizations people often associate with museum redevelopments in answering how will the new museum be different. I said it'll be characterized by a move from shallow engagement to deeper engagement, from intermittent research efforts to sustained research efforts. And what I meant was that people's engagement with global issues like climate change, like Indigenous reconciliation or migration, is often limited to reading headlines or liking causes on Facebook. What we will do now is nurture deeper engagement that deals in greater depth with these issues, seeing the world always from our local BC perspective. And this means choreographing content, working with audiences to advance the museum's mission to tell BC stories well. At the same time, the voice, the content, and the actions of the modernized museum must conform to our core values, and in particular those of diversity, inclusivity, and impartiality. In the case of very sensitive subjects, which we need to raise and consider, we need to ensure content is respectful of relevant groups and communities. We must, of course, co-partner with Indigenous peoples over their objects and histories, and to acknowledge, as the Indigenous scholar Bonita Lawrence tells us, that it is the land that holds all knowledge of life and earth and is a constant teacher. For those engaged in living cultures and living landscapes alike, looking to the land and sea to unlock knowledge is an existential priority. The race to describe and archive the planet's biodiversity is becoming ever more urgent, underscoring the importance of museum-based biodiversity science, but also signifying that, ethically and logically, museums with natural history mandates must take action to conserve natural habitats and intangible cultural heritage. It's vital that we harness technology, big data, new types of photography to help us share findings with other museums, collaborating with research institutions and all those interested in British Columbia and the world alike. For example, we need to disseminate our research through digital pathways and leverage our discoveries by linking with international aggregations of knowledge, like the Global Biodiversity Information Facility or the integrated digitized biocollections. Finally, we need to preserve and to grow our valuable collections, completely unique to British Columbia, as cultural, scientific, and global heritage. Which brings me back to the question of limits, or more specifically to the research limits we experience here at the Royal BC Museum. At this point, I could, of course, default to such comfortable idioms as the sky's the limit, or we are only limited by our imagination. And while the latter does find expression in our work, I am thinking in particular here of the collaborative research developed by Dr. Tsui Chung from the Knowledge Department and Chris O'Connor from the Learning Department, who together are exploring the complex subjects of representation and museum practice. Today, more than ever before, there is here at the museum a stronger sense of working together across disciplines. A host of initiatives encourage collaboration, cooperation, and discussion, providing more of a common, if complex, narrative. For the purposes of today's opening remarks, I'm interested in exploring the more tangible limits to our research programme, made manifest by the physical buildings within which we work and in which we are seated today. The Royal BC Museum buildings, including the Fannin Administrative and Collections Tower, the BC Archives, and the Exhibition Building, currently do not meet contemporary seismic standards. They lack world-class digital infrastructure and fail to provide adequate access to our collections. We lack adequate office and lab spaces, and as in the case of the Fannin Tower, this limits our ability to co-locate research teams. These are buildings that are culturally unsafe for the very people and communities with whom we intend to collaborate with in the future. This past February, the province announced a commitment to modernising the museum. In the weeks since that announcement, I'm gratified to note government is really moving fast and supporting our development plans. Indeed, the plans to modernise are now moving at a surprising speed and with a significant social element. At this point, we're in a stage of community engagement as we work with governments to solicit input from all regions of the province, asking citizens, stakeholders, and indeed museum and archive staff how they envision the future of the Royal BC Museum. As we come closer to a plan for modernisation, my hope is that there will be a harmonious blending of public desires and our vision. What we seek is a new paradigm, a modernised provincial museum that proudly and authentically takes on the mantle of a world-leading hub of local knowledge and learning. To truly engage with the public, we need spaces that put learning and knowledge at its philosophical and physical core. Research, like the ideas we will digest at this Spring Institute, must continue to be accessible to the public and must continue to be communicated clearly as relevant to civic welfare. We do not yet know what shape or form the modernised Royal BC Museum will take, but it's my hope and expectation that the collections, our research and engagement with citizens will take centre stage. The revitalised museum will have the distinct advantage of a long history of collecting and a long history of research at this museum. The recipe for success is our motivation to get behind the creation of Canada's most inspiring museum. The tone and substance of that museum depends on us. It depends on our work. and it depends on our commitment. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all much for taking part. Thank you all for everybody who's been working on their papers over the weeks and months and for contributing to the Spring Institute. And thank you, Leah, very much for pulling it all together. I'm extremely proud of where we've got to. And without further ado, it's now my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Erica Wheeler, who will introduce this morning's programme. Thank you very much.